Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about samizdat, or we publish ourselves in Russian. Now, this was a project I did for a class last semester called Youth Subcultures After Socialism. So the pretense to this assignment was that we were assigned a certain subculture in Soviet Russia, and so we had to present a little bit about it and how it affected youth culture. Now, I was looking on YouTube for some sources on this subject, and I really couldn't find much that was in English, so I thought this might help other English-speaking students researching the subject. So, firstly, let's take a look at what these reproduced works looked like. Now, you can clearly see that they are printed on very thin paper, which is known as onion paper, and those of you who are, say, Christian, you might think that it looks much like the Bible, and this was because, of course, the people did not have access to the same quality of printing materials as, of course, state-run printing presses. So this was printed on very thin material, as well as with ink that was often made at home by using basically things that you had lying around. Now let's really start talking about it. So obviously the material that was published was not allowed by the state, as obviously the state was communist and therefore did not allow a lot of freedom of expression. So naturally, there's a lot of illegal material as well as original material reproduced or produced underground and was passed from person to person, kind of like an underground press, people call it. And this content that was recreated was usually banned due to religious, sexual, or political material. And I just want to make a note here, say a book could be 99.9% not sexual, but have a very small sexual, religious, or political aspect to it, and then it could be banned. So, kids' content was not often reproduced, except for Chronicles of Narnia and poetry. Chronicles of Narnia, the author was Christian, and although there is no very obvious examples of the author's Christian beliefs coming out in the writing, people have often pointed to certain aspects of the Chronicles of Narnia and saying that it was inspired by his religion, and so also some poetry as well. So this practice really began in the 1940s with Nikolai Glasgow. I hope I'm getting that right. And we'll talk about him more later. So this was mostly produced by hand because typewriters and printing devices required permission from the state. Um, so, for example, you might go to some place that's kind of like a library and ask to rent a typewriter or printing device, and you would have to provide your name and an ID essentially. So clearly, this was very dangerous, and if caught, one risks being sent to prison or a psychiatric facility, which actually happened to Nikolai, which we will talk about later. People as young as teenagers engage in this practice because a lot of teenagers were unhappy with the Soviet Union. And so a lot of teenagers wrote their own probably bad poetry and such. So this also included the practice of reproducing and self-publishing illegal audio, which we will also get to in just a minute. So here I have compiled a list of commonly recreated content, which includes 1984 by George Orwell, as well as Animal Farm, J.R.R. Tolkien's novels, religious material, jazz, bard, and rock music, anti-Soviet material, fanzines, almanacs, newspapers, etc. Feel free to pause it to read the rest of the list. I will briefly touch on the process, but I would really urge you to watch videos such as the history of making books, building a printing press at MIT, because I think it's something that's best understood when you can visually see it and hear from experts. So the homemade printing presses used to recreate materials would be often made of everyday household materials. For example, someone created a printing press out of washing machine, and ink out of moss and burned tires. So these presses were made to be disassembled for discreet travel to share, often to a safe house. So someone even created one that could fit in a suitcase. A person would begin by creating a few copies of a book onto onion paper, and this could be handwritten, typed, or mimeographed. People would hide papers inside of clothing so that they could transport them to people who bind the books, which is a totally different process. Um, Reproducing these books eventually evolved into Xeroxing or retyping, and obviously this took a very long time. Vladimir Bukowski was a Russian human rights activist, neurophysiologist, and writer. He was a major player in the Russian dissident movement from the late 50s to the mid 70s. He was credited as exposing the political abuse of psychiatry. Those in power that had political opponents would put them away in psych wards on false accusations. So he was banned from the Soviet Union in 1976, but continued to speak out about the Soviet system. And he is credited as saying, Samizdat, I write it myself, edit it myself, censor it myself, publish it myself, distribute it myself, and spend time in prison for it by myself. And that is from To Build a Castle, My Life as a Dissenter, which he wrote. So here we are. Why was it popular with young people? Well, this is because this allowed them to read anti-Soviet materials, popular Western books, and listen to popular genres outside of the Soviet Union, such as rock and jazz. Material for young children was not often remade, like I mentioned. The most notable exclusion, again, like I mentioned, was C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, which was banned due to his Christian beliefs. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was officially translated into Russian once, but was censored due to supposed religious imagery. So samizdat materials, both making them, trading them, and enjoying them allowed for a form of escapism. Many young people felt lost. They felt like the Soviet Union had betrayed them, and many of them felt like they didn't really have much of a future to look towards. So they created fanzines or fan magazines, which is still like was popular in America in the late 90s and early 2000s, if any of you remember that. So teenagers would often write poetry and fiction themselves, again, allowed for some form of escapism, and often they did not have much of a creative outlet, say in school. So there is a Russian state library for young adults, which you can go view, and now it is more inclusive. Ribs or Rotingensidat were band recordings on X-rays, and the content often included Western styles of music such as jazz and rock. Audio tapes were magnetizidat were less common. These magnetic tapes often included lectures, bard music, or underground music, and it also included several big names that introduced Western styles of music to the Russian public. So illegal audio was considered less risky than samizdat because it was legal to own personal reel-to-reel recorder, but it was still, you could still be sent to jail. And there's just a really awesome video by Slate called Phone Records. Let's end this video with a joke. A Soviet official strides into his wife's room. Natasha, you've been typing for 5 straight days, he says. What takes so long? Oh, Ivan, don't you know? I'm typing Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, that's what. But why? There is the book. It's perfectly legible. You can read it in print. Yes, but the children won't read anything less it's typed.
Hello?